Today, I've got Greg Weller on the podcast. He's the Regional Executive Director of the HIA for the ACT and Southern New South Wales. He's the guy in the room when the big decisions are being made about our industry. Greg's been in the game for a while and he's seen it all from building booms, slowdowns, red tape, busted planning systems, you name it. He's out there pushing for change and he's calling out what's not working and trying to make it easier for builders and businesses like us. We get into a heap of stuff in this chat. What's holding construction back in the ACT, why the DA and BA process is so cooked, what the HIA is actually doing behind the scenes, and how we can get a stronger voice at the table. First guest of the podcast, so really pumped about that. To get Greg in at short notice too. Anyway, let's get into it. To get into it, I'll give everyone a bit of a background on Greg. Greg, you are the Regional Executive Director of the HIA and the for the ACT and the Southern New South Wales. You're the guy in the room when the big decisions are being made.
That's right. Yeah, look, it's a bit of a mouthful of a time.
It is. It is.
We've got a pretty big area to cover. So on the after the ACT, but also Southern New South Wales. So down the south coast, out to the Riverina, we've got a really active branch out in Wagga. The guys out there do a fantastic job. Also down to the Snowies as well. So we cover a pretty big area. But in terms of the big decisions for policies, I spend a lot of time talking to the ACT government about what's going on and how the decisions they make impact on home building.
And you enjoy it?
I do, yeah. I've been with HIA around 14 years.
Yeah.
I think
It's a while now, yeah.
It's been quite a while. So about half of that I was in the national office as part of the communications team there. And about the second half of that time, I've been in this role in ACT and Southern New South Wales and enjoy it.
I mentioned this to you, but you're a big help with me with that, with the rally. You're sort of the guiding light in the background, just slowly, steadily steering me along. What did you think about the rally?
Oh, I think it was a fantastic initiative. And I think it was great that it was great that you drove it. It's not something we normally do. It's not the kind of thing we do, and probably a number of years back, it might be thought that's not the kind of way of doing something, but I think it was a great way. Sometimes when things need to be said and need to be done, and they require a bit of a different approach and a different approach. And so I think it was well worth doing. I was really glad to be involved in it, and probably giving me a bit too much credit. Did all the real legwork for it and getting people involved, but I think it was good. And look, it's a cliche, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and I think we are a little bit in desperate times.
I think so too. Look, it brings into the next question here. What's the vibe in the industry at the moment from your side? Like, what are you getting from members? What are they saying?
Oh, look, I always like to think of our members as a incredibly optimistic bunch, and we are a can-do industry. We're the people who make things happen and solve problems, particularly in the space you're in, where not just the new home building, we've got a bit of a clean slate, but where you're working in alternads or landscaping, things like that. There's a lot of problem solving, and it's a great industry, and that's why I enjoy it. So I'd never say people are miserable or anything like that, but I think despite the optimistic nature of our members, they're doing it tough, and I think a lot of people, a comment I get is it's not as fun now as it once is a sort of a line I get from people where they just say, it's a hard business. You're often outdoors, in the cold, in the heat.
Early mornings.
It's a tough industry, but people still enjoy it and thrive on it. But I hear that a lot from people these days, and also from colleagues of mine around the country get that too. People just saying, I don't know whether it's as fun as it once was.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. But I would also add to that, I feel like in construction, we're sort of a little bit at a disadvantage from pretty much what you just said. Like, we sort of just want to get in and get the job done, and there's not a lot of complaining. It's just suck it up. This is what we've got to deal with, and let's get into it, essentially. I think without, people like yourself and the HIA, I mean, like advocating for construction, I mean, it'd be a pretty tough climate. Yeah, I mean, like talk to us about the work that you've been doing and what the advocacy you've been doing of late. Like, I saw you had some stuff to say on Facebook the other day.
Yeah, look, the last few years, I don't think, and particularly in the last term of government, we have never seen so much change and so much. The government calls it reform. I'm not sure reform maybe puts a positive connotation on it. I don't think all the government here and around the governments around the country have done has necessarily been positive.
Yeah.
Over the last few years, we just saw so much change. We in a period of time around the end of 2023, we saw changes in regards to gas bans in the ACT. We saw a new territory plan come in. We saw a change to the Urban Forest Act, which was probably another whole other discussion in itself.
Yeah.
And so the NCC changes as well, and the move to 7-star. We saw some, and that was just all in a period of a couple of months. And I think there's just been so much fatigue from the industry, and none of this so-called reform has made things easier to build or better to build or cheaper to build.
Yeah.
And I think members are, struggling to keep up with the change that's there, and it's generally always adding more costs to building a new home. And I think we're seeing that a lot at the moment with the difficulty in renting, the cost of renting, and the cost of people getting into new homes.
And the housing crisis is a symptom of not enough houses being built. I think, and with everything being made more difficult, it means it's more expensive, which means people are less likely to build.
There's so much of the problems that builders face that are unnecessary. Something you and I have talked a lot about before has been the challenges around trees. The changes to the Urban Forest Act from around late 23, early 24 that came in was supposed to make things a little bit easier and recognise that if Canberra's having such a focus on building within the existing city footprint, that we would need to deal with the issues of trees. So certainly the expectation was that we have a better system of being able to manage trees and conduct tree damage activities, including removal of trees, which is something which is necessary if we're going to build 70% of the city's new homes as infill. But to be honest, it's probably just made it a lot harder and slower. And so back to my point about the red tape, quite often the end result ends up being the same. The tree gets removed in the end because that's where the new dwellings and new development needs to be. But there's a whole lot of additional rigmarole that just didn't need to happen. We end up with DAs occurring that just don't need to be there. And again, another thing we've talked about has been the time it takes when getting approvals for entity referrals.
Yeah.
We end up having to go through getting boxes ticked, whether it's with Evo Energy, Icon, Water.
Yeah.
And the result happens in the end. You get the approval.
Yeah.
But did it need to take so long? And do we need all these statutory periods of weeks on weeks where people have to make a decision, which they invariably make anyway very quickly?
Yeah.
And they make the decision and you go on with life. But I think there's probably not a good understanding of how much that actually costs, how much the holding costs for jobs, the rent that someone's paying because they can't move into their property, all of these things that's being added on throughout the system. I don't know if there's an appreciation of that.
Do you think that the government thought about this stuff before they brought in all these changes? Because for my mind, it's sort of like they brought it all in with this really good intent, which is to improve the building quality, in my mind. And then they sort of like, we'll just work out how this is all going to work after enacting everything. Do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that. I think we've been disappointed over recent years at some of the way consultation has been conducted.
Yeah.
I think we could have, in hindsight, on a lot of things, consultation could have been a bit better. To maybe, pick the brains of people within industry and say, if we do this, rather than worrying about how they control the message and how things are rolled out, actually sitting down and maybe trusting people with industry and say, well, here's what we're thinking of doing. Why don't you workshop it and tell us what will go wrong if you do it that way. So I think that's been part of the problem as well. I think another part of the problem is you mentioned good intentions. When you look at so many of things that have changed over recent years, when you look at them individually, it's hard to say, well, that's a bad idea or that's a bad idea. When we look at with the National Construction Code, you say, let's go to 7-star, and it sounds like a great idea. Let's bring in accessibility requirements, do that as well. All of these different things, the Urban Forest Act is all about retain the bush capital nature and not creating a heat island. Nothing's a particularly bad idea, but slowly they just start more and more to butt up against each other. And we're just finding that they're incompatible. And it's becoming really difficult to actually get what people want to do. And that is either improve their existing home, improve the amenity, improve the environmental performance, the livability, or build a new home. And it really gets down to, because they're having to say to build an extension on their home, it's so difficult to get an energy rating when
Exactly.
it's probably, if we were to just codify and say to a builder, use these R values in the wall, do this, and you'll go through, because let's face it, the rest of the house is probably
Single glaze.
Exactly. And so it goes through all this to try and build an extension. And then all of a sudden, to get through the energy rating system, it's asking questions, well, can I even match the colour on the roof to the new part of the home to the old one? So I think in a lot of those areas, by trying to maybe gold plate things, try and focus on some of these things, saying we've got to make it perfect, it's becoming the enemy of the good, when there could be a lot better ways of just saying, coming up with simpler ways of letting people build an extension on a home and improve their amenity. Let them build something that suits their family, stay in the one place. And on that point, we want to see renovations, but so many of these things I think we're seeing with the new planning system and with also the energy requirements is it's pushing us more down the path towards just knocking something down.
It is.
And building a new
knock down, rebuild, start again, go for it. Yeah, it's and that makes it difficult, right? I think because you want to have options. I think in construction, some people might not have the funds to upgrade their home to a 7-star with just putting an extension on. I don't think a lot of Canberrans as well understand what 7-star entails or what these different energy ratings and the different levels of them are involved. Like you mentioned about the roof color, like that's a really good one. Like a lot of people wouldn't know that, a dark roof, like a monument color, the difference between that and a surf mist roof being a stark difference between an energy rating, like you were sort of saying before. What would you say to a Canberran that's thinking about construction or thinking about building?
Now's a very good time to do it. We're certainly at a point in the market where, despite all the things talked about the challenges that are out there, we're in a period where we are in somewhere near the bottom of the cycle in the building market at the moment. So I'd say right now there's a lot of builders who have got capacity to be able to do work at the moment. I'd say we've also we're in a very unique period during COVID when we saw significant escalations in prices of products. I think that's all behind us, and you can now build with a lot more certainty, both for the builder and for the client. So I think there's a lot of things pointing towards now being a pretty good time to do it. And we've got a good industry here in Canberra.
I think we really do. Yeah.
We've got a well-regulated industry. I encourage people, if they are looking for a builder, to look for people who belong to an industry association such as HIA. You can get online and look at who the award-winning builders are. I mean, we certainly have awards through a whole range of price categories as well. So the guys who are taking out the real top awards, you may not have that sort of a budget, but there's a lot of pointers there. The people who are entering, the people who are winning categories of all different prices. So
and you got finalists in there as well. So you don't have to pick the top guy, but these guys have got a good reputation, and your judges have been out there and had a look through their work.
I think people who are opening themselves up to competitions, things like this, and are part of associations who hopefully have a better understanding of what a lot of the requirements are on building. I mean, I think in terms of building in Canberra, there are options. There are options. Knockdown rebuilds you touched on is obviously one. It's a great way to do it. And as I said, sometimes some of the way the systems are, it's a little easier to just do that. But it has its challenges as well too, because you then need to find somewhere else to live for perhaps another year while your house is replaced. Whereas a major renovations, alterations can give you a bit more extra space, better amenity. But chances are, depending on the project, you can probably stay in the house for a lot of the time as well as you don't have to move in with the in-laws for 4 months, which you may not want to do. And so
save yourself a bit of heartache there.
a bit of heartache or more money renting elsewhere. So they're good options. certainly it is availability of land in the new suburbs as well at the moment in the ACT. So there are opportunities for people to build new homes in greenfield estates as well too.
Yep.
Again, it's a different kettle of fish again. Building in a new suburb has its, can have its benefits too. And probably from the build point of view, a lot of builders would love to be building there because there's no concerns around neighbours. We're not the problems of, one of the big issues that were talked about is, of course, the trees and the challenges you have around that. So
they knock them all down pretty much.
Yeah, to create the new. So you can design around if there's a stand of old trees. I can master plan the suburb around that, and then you'll start from scratch, and there'll be the street trees, and you can plant your own trees within your block, which is a requirement now. So there's a lot of options for people within the ACT. I think one area where we are a little short is it's a bit of a buzzword, the missing middle.
Yeah.
But there's over coming weeks, there'll be some changes proposed to the planning system. They're going to be coming out in the next little while. You heard it here first, Hervey. And there's going to be over coming weeks. There's going to be some new ideas that the government's putting out there in terms of what development might look like in RZ1 and RZ2 as well, to increase the density there in those residential zones. So I think that's an area where I think we all want to see a little bit more development done, because if we are going to get the houses we need, it's great to see on the large individual blocks those split and having better opportunities to build two attached homes. If we're going to, which is an important part of the market, and I think where the government gets the policy settings right for that, it will be popular. But I think if we're going to get all the dwellings to meet our targets that we need, definitely that middle there that breaches the massive divide in the ACT between an apartment tower and an attached home. That low-rise, medium-density space is where we've got to build a lot more. And hopefully some of the things that are going to be proposed by the government over the coming months will help fill that hole.
Yeah, and like the missing middle, I think it is really important. You've got older people in a massive house that still love the area, but maybe looking to downsize. And I think where that missing middle comes in, you've got a, say, 1,000 square metre block, and you can put two detached houses on it, or even a dual occupancy. They're still able to stay in the area, but they can downsize to a smaller place potentially. I definitely think that's really important. One of the things I wanted to mention to you, and it comes from the TikTok bloke that was here in the ACT. Do you think we've got a problem in the ACT with quality for construction?
I don't think any jurisdiction has a monopoly on good quality or poor quality construction. It's an interesting thing that the licensing regimes and the certification regimes, which are really the two key things
definitely
that cover the management of quality building, and probably to a lesser degree, they're there from a compliance point of view, and probably training feeds into that as well too. The system's different in every state and territory. New South Wales has a lot of licenses for a lot of trades. Here we don't license trades at all, other than the high risk ones of plumbing and electrical, but the other trades aren't licensed. Yet you don't necessarily can point to across jurisdictions where one's doing it way better or worse than the other. Everyone seems to make it work. But no, I don't think we've got a quality problem here in the ACT. I think there are practitioners who aren't up to the standard. A message we continually put to government agencies, the only key ones here that we talk to a lot is WorkSafe, ACT, and also Access Canberra, managing license. The message we put to them is where they know who the problem people are. And they're the ones coming across them. Go after them with both barrels. And I think that's what, if you talk to most of the industry, that's what they would say. There are people out there who aren't doing the right thing. And I think we make sure that they aren't part of the industry in the future, because it's not good for all the good builders out there. It is only a very small part of the industry. Every industry has them. Where they're there, I think it's incumbent on the industry and regulators together to make sure they're not here.
Well, you're right. There's a few bad apples in every bunch, right? And I feel like, bad news travels around the world before good news gets out of bed. And everyone wants to talk about the bad builder that's, done X, Y, or Z. And there are, I don't think there's a lot of them. I think sometimes builders do make mistakes though, and maybe they get caught up in it. But look, I don't think we've got a quality problem here. I think that I mentioned it in my previous sort of chat was I think a lot of people need to take responsibility. Like the homeowner, look, it's a terrible situation that they're in. The TikTok with the TikTok inspector, but I mean, did they check? You know, did they look at what that builder's rap sheet was? Who was the certifier? Did they nominate the certifier? I mean, that's sort of my take on it. It's terrible, and I don't think that person or that builder should be building anymore. But yeah,
I think sometimes people, I think there is a role for everyone. And I'd say to consumers or potential consumers who are listening to this, I think a lot of people are guilty, or maybe that's not the right word, as they're often the victims. People will spend as much time researching a new telly or goods as they might a builder. They'll spend a lot of time reading reviews, checking out products, going to different stores. Do they all spend that amount of due diligence on their builder? We say to people, look, don't be afraid if you're talking to a builder to say, well, where's a few of your projects I can drive past? You got someone who you've got a client who you've finished something for recently that I could talk to and understand the experience. So given this is probably one of the single biggest investments
they're going to make. Yeah.
I'd really say to people, don't be overawed by the process where maybe they feel we're buying a car or they've got more power and they can research and ask the questions. This is a much bigger investment. Do it with your home and make sure that it's a builder who you click with and you've heard other people say it was a great experience dealing with it. And I think that's one thing I'd say to people is, don't be afraid to really take control and ask all the questions to make sure you're getting the right person. I do think from a government point of view, I hope someone saw that video.
I'm sure they did.
And went after it and had a good look at it, because it shouldn't be up to some fella from interstate to come and point those sorts of things out. I do think that there's probably a lot of elements in looking at that video and without knowing the detail. And I think from what came across in that, there was a lot of things there that perhaps suggest some of the decisions made maybe a willful, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe some of the decisions are just not good training. And we talk about licensing, whether licensing everybody solves every problem. I think that perhaps some more control could help improve training. That could encourage more people to complete qualifications. I think that that's an area where we perhaps could look at in the ACT, is that it is a relatively short period of time to get a builder's license. And it can be a mix of people who get that builder's license who may be of living and breathing building sites for 10 years. But then there's other people who have come from another industry who may not have done that. And I think perhaps there could be ways to making sure that people who get the license in a shorter period of time could be spending more time on site, perhaps maybe before they're taking on larger projects like detached home building.
Yeah, definitely. We'll change tack a little bit here. It's been a pretty tough last 3 years with a lot of builders going insolvent and just really tough in the industry, I think. Can you define leadership for me and how that leadership, how you've got people through the last couple of years?
I think it's been a really difficult time. It started with COVID, and I think a lot of the problems we're seeing now, while COVID's a distant memory, we're still seeing people probably suffering that never came out of some of the financial challenges of COVID. And I suppose for your listeners' benefit, one of the biggest issue was that the industry historically has always worked on fixed price contracts. And we've been able to do that because prices have remained pretty stable from when you quote a job, you go through the job, finish the job, and generally you end up paying the prices for the raw materials and the labour as to what you quoted on. Whereas obviously we saw that in COVID, where we had these unprecedented escalations in the cost of labour and the cost of materials. And it ended up a lot of builders were paying to finish people's houses. Now they were in the red at the end of a job, and as a businessman, that's a risk that you take. You take the wins in the good times and you take those losses, but it definitely pulled a lot of capital out of the industry and left a lot of people in a difficult position. So certainly starting with COVID, we saw a very important role for our organisation. Certainly in that case, the pandemic, when people were looking for information, to be able to help people to be able to understand what the rules were. I think over this period of the last few years, that was a very key leadership element to be able to give the industry support. Yes, that they come out of that. And I guess we're now going into a new phase, which is post-COVID, and we're in a situation now where builders, I think, are really looking for support around their business, how they can manage their businesses as well, managing cash flow, how they're quoting on jobs, managing the costs as well, and also dealing with, as I mentioned, over the last couple of years,
the changes,
which has just been really frustrating that at a time when the industry has been really doing it tough.
Yeah.
So many changes have come in that we couldn't just say, look, do these things really need to happen right now? Do we really need to get semi-start about now? Do we really need to bring in these requirements right now? So I think from a leadership point of view, I think it's been important to be able to be a strong voice for the industry and put these messages to government, but also be a resource to industry where we can, I guess, help them through a lot of these challenges.
Yeah, and I think the HIA do that really well. I really liked when there was all the changes that came in, and the HIA basically deciphered the changes and was able to communicate to their members, this is how these changes are going to affect you. And I think there was some seminars that you guys did to explain the changes further and how to navigate the changes. And I really appreciate, all the work that the HIA does. We've been a member for a while now. And what would you say to someone that doesn't know about the HIA?
Firstly, I hope they would. You'll notice I've got my little ABs.
I did notice that, yeah.
Yeah, we this year's our birthday. So 1945, group of builders in Melbourne got together, and interestingly enough, the cost and supply of materials was the big issue of the day. It was post-Second World War, and getting building materials at that point in time was really tough. There was a bit of a housing crisis and a lot of similarities with today. There was a lot of new Australians coming into the country to rebuild after the war and start a lot of our infrastructure projects, and anything particularly made of, steel, things like that, timber, were all difficult to get hold of. And so a lot of home builders decided they needed a voice, and that's how that started. And so this year we're 80 years, and we try and support our members and hopefully help create better homes for Australians and affordable homes for Australians. Yeah, in terms of the support we've given the industry, I think being a national organisation, we're the only nationally based builders organisation that supports only residential building. And so I think that national presence really helped us through a national crisis like COVID, that we were able to be effective and produce some really good resources. We were the only organisation I know of that produced a lot of the on-site resources in multiple languages. We picked about half a dozen of the most common non-English languages used on building sites, and reproduced all our materials to support our diverse workforce. And so I think, again, the benefits of being one national organisation really came through in that time, and we were glad to be able to support the industry, which was a pretty tough time. We had the longest lockdowns here in the ACT, the building industry in the country, and so hats off to all the people in the industry here in the ACT for their efforts during that time to get through.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough time, and getting the alerts out from you guys, hey, this is how to deal with COVID, really important. I think what the HIA do for the residential sector is really important. I know that there was there's Let's Build that's come out about the future of construction in what the HIA want to see happen, essentially.
Yeah, look, and that was some work that we've done around the federal election, and we're almost there. I think everyone, as with any election, probably by the time we get to the end of it, are pretty happy when
it's long in the tooth now, isn't it? Let's get it over and done.
Well, I think this one's been even worse. They've pretty much been going since Christmas. Yeah, when we kind of had the we kind of had the faux campaign for a while before the real one. Yeah. So it's been going for a while. I think everyone will be glad when it's finished. But look, our national team have done a wonderful job. You mentioned the campaign, Let's Build. That's been, if anyone's interested in finding out more, if they popped HIA Let's Build in, I imagine they'd find a lot of our materials on our website. And hopefully people have seen some of the short videos that we've produced across our social media platforms, which I guess talk about some of the key things that we'd like to see for the industry going forward. Certainly, training is one of the big things we talked about. We are facing some big workforce shortages right now in the ACT. It's not as big a problem given the historically low numbers of building at the moment, but the industry will come back.
How do we attract more young people, and how do we keep them?
Oh, look, that's a
tricky one.
That is a great question, and it is a really hard one because it's a great industry to be in, as we touched on before. Yeah, it's not for everybody. It can be noisy, hot, cold, early morning starts, physically demanding, but there's so many opportunities in it.
There is.
People can start off in trade. They can work for themselves, or they can work for someone like ACT Decks or ACT Landscapes, and but then they can go on to, they can spend time on site, eventually go on to run their own business, whether it's a contractor working for a builder, or maybe they go on to get a builder's license and work there. And of course, there's not just within the industry, it's not just about the trades and building. There's so many other special trades as well, designers. One answer is that attracting young people, helping them understand that the construction sector is a great place to be, and you don't have to be a tradie. Yeah, and it's not the only pathway. There's a lot of other roles there as well. I think helping young people understand the benefits that they can get out of running their own business, and the flexibility that can afford them, and the opportunities are there as well.
I think being in construction, you learn a lot really quickly. I think it's really good to have a trade as a foundation, or even just being a labourer for a while to, I guess, get right in there and learn some life skills really quickly. I mean, you're on site, there's a concrete pour, or, you got windows going in, it's go, go, go. And I think that speed teaches fast, and the people in construction want to teach you because they want to make you better so that you get through the work faster and, you can get onto the next job. And definitely having a trade or being in construction is a good foundation and a good platform to go off into other things. You get a trade behind you, you can be an estimator, you can do all different sorts of things. And I know the firefighters really like tradespeople. So I think it's a really good platform for young people to get into, for sure.
It's not just, I think as you rightly point out there, you could be a trade and you could go on to be a builder, but you could go on to be a fireman or a police. You could end up in tertiary education doing something completely different as well. But look, I think one of our biggest competitors here in the ACT is the tertiary education sector. A lot of focus on that, but I think again, I'd say apprentice wages, as to be expected, you are an apprentice. The wages are evolve and they reflect that. But you don't get paid anything to go to university. You actually end up with a debt.
Correct.
At the end of that. And so I think that's one thing to help people understand. Did you come out ahead at the end and you learn so much? And as you said, it is go, go, go. They can be high pressure environments, and that helps build resilience and teach you skill. And I think it's also important that perhaps some parents might have a negative stereotype that there's, and I think that building sites aren't like what they've always been. There are a lot more focus on safety these days, whether it's physical safety or site safety. You don't have to be 100 kilos and a footy player and to be able to lug bags of concrete. There's enough mechanical aids and safety procedures to ensure that people aren't unduly physically exerted on site. So they are safe places to be. And also, again, I like to think that we're doing it a lot better in terms of the way people on site are respected and the way they are treated and included in those parts of the teams. And as you said, trained to make them better.
Absolutely. I'll roll down. I've gone way off script. I have not stuck to it. We've not that I had a script. We just bounced around. The housing crisis. What's causing the housing crisis in your mind?
Obviously, population and the amount of housing being supplied aren't keeping track with each other.
Yep.
That's one of the elements there. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a pretty simple equation. Some politicians make it a lot harder than what it is. But if you're not building enough homes,
it's a very simple equation that way. Yeah.
To keep it in balance with the number of people, whether it's the birth rate, whether it's people coming into the country. Are we bringing in more or too little people?
Yep.
Don't know. Probably don't really have an opinion on.
Yeah.
The answer is if you're going to bring in that many people,
build more houses.
houses, and I think that's one of the big issues. So I think that's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Is how many homes we are building.
What I would say to that is, as a builder, I don't feel very supported by the government. I feel supported by yourself at the HIA. I feel supported by the NBA, but I don't feel supported by the government. The government keeps talking about the housing crisis and building more houses. On all the panels and things like that they've got, there's not a builder sitting on there, and I think that you can talk about it all you want, but until you get serious about, like, get a builder on there and say, how do we fix this? Every builder knows how to fix it. Make the approvals more builder friendly and just get stuck into it. Like, let's go. We've got timber stacked up down in is it Melbourne where that big timber yard is? I think they've got an abundance of timber sitting down there because of the overs from COVID when there was no timber around. And I guess to see, all these panels and everyone keep talking about the housing crisis like it's unsolvable is frustrating. And do you think the government really wants to solve this or just keep talking about it?
Oh, I think that governments at all levels, across all states and territories, I think they're all guilty. One of the big problems, I think, is we put out a report very recently. We had a group of independent economists, the Centre for International Economics, produced a report for us. They found that the worst case was Sydney, but a house and land package there, 49% of the final cost of a house and land package to the consumer was the cost of taxes, regulation, holding costs, charges, etc. I mean, that sounds difficult to believe.
Astronomical, but
think about it. That there's a 10% GST
on everything.
On a new home, and it's not on an existing home.
Yeah,
and so already you're pushing up. You've already got a 10% advantage where someone's in the market to say, well, go fight over existing homes instead of encouraging people to build new because of that. And then you've got all of these other taxes and charges in there. And if you flip it around the other way, and we tested it this way, is if you add up all the timber, the nails, the screws, the builder's margin, everything like that, you take the undeveloped land and they come up to about half the price, and you work it back the other way. And our economist builds it from the ground up. You look at it the other way, and yet it's pretty much half of that is not us.
Yeah.
You talk about not being supported. There's all this cost that we're not getting it.
Yeah, that's right.
Someone else is getting it, not us. So don't blame the builder for why the house and land package is
so expensive.
And so there's all this other cost in there, and government's getting a lot of it. And a lot of it's a dead weight loss that's going in the system because it's going on interest or whatever else. But a lot of it in there is tax, and a lot of it's cascading as well. You'll pay for insurance for something, and as a builder, you know the amount of insurance you pay. And they've all got stamp duty on it.
Yeah.
Then that goes in there, and then there's another tax on that, and then another tax on that. And so you get this massive amount there. So I think to start with, there's not a lot in it for government to get rid of a lot of it.
I agree.
So they're a little bit conflicted here. I mean, here in the ACT, they've got a real challenge in that the government is one of the major land developers in town here.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, they're wanting to put roofs over the head of the population and make sure that everyone in the ACT has a home, and so that we can get the best and brightest people that move here to skills and to take up jobs. So there's a big incentive for the government to make sure that we get more homes built. But at the same time, they make a fair bit of money out of developing the land too, and so
the land prices are high, and there's a short supply of it. There always seems to be a short supply of it.
And how do you do that? How do you be the guy that's in charge of providing affordable housing for the community? You're also the bloke who's making money out of the land that the housing goes on. It's a pretty tough problem for government to put themselves in that situation to try and balance wearing both those hats.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like, I don't feel supported by the government because it's almost like they're blaming builders for not building enough homes. But in the same regard, they've got, all these taxes. And I read that report and I was actually blown away. I read it twice because I was like, the percentage you mentioned was it 49% in taxes?
Yeah.
That just blows me away.
I think the next thing I'd say is one of the big problems. It's not strictly part of the DA process, but it's all within that ballpark is the lease variation charge.
Yeah,
we've got to look at that in terms of how we're charging and how much we're charging on redevelopments within. And I'm talking here.
Did they bring
rise development?
Did they bring that in because builders were making too much money, or did I just hear that and make it up?
Well, the argument behind the lease variation charge is this: you have a parcel of land, and you theoretically take in RZ2, you can theoretically build a multi-rally on there. Now, you theoretically can do that because it's zoned for that. Yeah, you don't have permission to do it yet because it hasn't been unit title. And so the argument from the government is with the stroke of a pen, we give you permission to do that. We've given you a windfall gain. Yeah. And we'd argue, well, RZ2 that's the whole point of it. It's to build townhouses. Exactly. You're not being gifted something special. It's a piece of land that it's there to build townhouses.
It's already,
But the argument is, well, you can't do it. And by us letting you do it, you get a windfall gain. The community needs to get most of that. Yeah. And the argument is that 3/4 of the uplift gets taken by the government. And the person who owns it is taking all the risk, gets what's left.
Gets lots less, yeah.
And so it's not about providing any of the services for the area. It's simply saying it's a betterment tax. You get an uplift out of that. The community should take most of it. Is the way it works. I think the problem is where the settings are for it.
Yeah,
because people just aren't building it. It's the most common reason you talk to builders why there aren't more townhouses, because we talk about the missing middle changes.
Too expensive.
Yeah, why is it missing?
Yeah, it's too expensive.
You can do these things. Yeah, you can build townhouses right now. But why aren't people doing it? And why is it this missing? One of the big areas is it's got this whopping great tax on it from the government. And my argument to the government and Treasury is, in February, they downgraded the annual amount of LVC they're going to be collecting in the budget by about 50%. So, my argument is, well, look, you're not getting any tax right now and you're building no houses. Why don't you do away with it?
Yeah.
You won't get any tax, but you might get some houses.
Stimulate.
I think that's where we'll never get rid of it altogether. And the ministers
said that.
Yeah. And particularly as you get into the large dwellings, I can see some leases that were never necessarily the likelihood of you building a multi-residential set of dwellings on it was probably not contemplated in the price you paid for that.
Yeah.
And so there's probably some arguments as when those leases are changed that there is something going back to the community, especially given the amount of residents that will be there and the change in the nature to the block. But I think a lot of this lower rise stuff, we've got to say, people just aren't doing the work.
Yeah.
And if this is one of the things that's standing in the way, then maybe we need to do something about it.
What's your message to local builders and tradies who feel like they're stuck?
I think that you're not going crazy.
Yep.
It's a pretty tough time, and there's a lot of people out there who are probably going through what you're going through. The industry, let's face it, last year we approved 680 detached homes in the ACT for the calendar year. That is the lowest number since the Bureau of Statistics started publishing these numbers in 1970.
Wow.
And it wasn't much better with apartments. We approved around 1,500.
Yeah.
And that was the lowest since around 2009.
Yeah.
So we're approving historically low levels of housing at the moment, in all forms. And so the industry is doing it tough. So I think in terms for builders and tradies out there who are feeling that it's difficult, I think
you got to place hope somewhere.
Yeah, look,
place it in the future. It's going to pick up. It has to pick up in the back end of the year, right?
Oh, I think it will. Look, and I think on the positive side, is that it's probably likely that in the second half of the year, certain markets are factoring in multiple interest rate reductions. So I think there is
more money in the economy.
There'll be more. I think the ACT always goes a bit funny around federal elections. There's always discussion about what federal election means to the ACT. Probably not a lot of it's founded, because I think a lot of this discussion around public servant numbers, probably a lot of those, if that was to take place and there were changes, probably a lot of them would be across the country as well too. They wouldn't all be from
Canberra.
Be from Canberra necessarily, but no doubt these discussions impact on the local economy, and rightly so. People are wondering what's going to happen with their job as well too. So I think once we get the federal election out of the way, regardless of the result, I think things will go back to normal a little bit, hopefully, in the ACT.
So you'd say, hold on, the work is coming and it's in the back end of the year. We hope. We hope.
Look, I think that the ACT, is a solid economy in the respect that there is a strong public sector here, which will always be here.
Yeah.
Got a big population base around us. We're in a fantastic area, one of the best parts of Australia. We're close to the snow, the coast, the country. It's a pretty good place to be, Canberra. And
I agree.
I don't think we're going to see the population changing very much. I do think we have a bit of work to do for interstate migration. Most of our population has been based on international migration. We have been students, which are great, which are welcome. But I think we need to do a bit more work to sell the message of Canberra's a good place to come and live and work, because I think we're a little slow at the moment on our interstate migration, but that's going to pick up. And so, look, there is hope. Hang on, and I think we will. I think there'll be better times ahead. Couple of interest rate cuts, get this election out of the way. Hopefully, some changes here on the ground within the government and the planning system to maybe stimulate some more activity. And things might look a bit better.
Look, great discussion there with Greg. One thing I know about Greg is he loves to talk, and if you listen closely enough, he's got some real gold, and he's a really, really smart guy and a fantastic operator. I think the good thing about Greg is he's just so willing to help. Like, if you're in a position where you need some advice or you need some support, pick up the phone, talk to Greg. He will set you on the right track. If he can't help you as well, he'll put you onto someone that will be able to support you. And there's a lot of support at the HIA. Look forward to catching up with Greg again, actually. Be a bit more prepared for the next catch up. Mainly get the batteries charged on the camera. We had an interesting situation. We had the laptop die. We had a camera die. But we're learning. We're learning here, and we're enjoying it. Got some really good guests coming up. And look, if you're watching this and you want to get involved and you want to come in and have a discussion about something, look, reach out to me. Hit me up on Instagram. I want to talk to as many people as I can. Every Thursday afternoon, generally, I'm going to film a podcast, and then I'm going to release that on the following Tuesday. 2:00 around about there is when we're looking to send them out on Tuesdays. Rowan and I generally work on the podcast then Friday and Monday, and then a bit of Tuesday morning, and then out it goes. If you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, follow along, or be a part of the journey. Get in touch with me. Come in and have a chat. Listen to my soothing voice.